back, and we're here again at the studio, number one studio here in Genesee County. If you doubt that, we're going to poke you in the nose. We will make these outstanding claims here, and we back it up with force. We're just going to start beating people up. You don't believe with power. Okay, well, we're not going to beat anybody up. We're very we practice the tenets of nonviolence, and we're not going to beat anybody up. And don't ever think about us getting out there, and we're not setting any fires. Yeah, it's a left thing anyway. What are we talking about? We're not going to set any fires. We're not going to do any damage to the country. We're not going to burn anything down. We're going to just try to continue doing what we're doing on the right. The right is pretty much we are the builders, and those persons that are trying to do other than that, we're going to stand in your way. You know, that's one of the things that I have to say about Trump. I give him a lot of credit for having made this statement. He's right. He said they're not after him. That's true. They're after him in the sense that he's a blocker. So yeah, they had to move him out of the way. But he made the point and said they're not after him. I mean, that's secondary. They're after us. And Donald Trump is just in their way. And that shows you how sick these people are. I think we have a mental health issue. I think there's a mental health issue with the will of power. We have not examined that. But I'm not going to stand there too long. I need to talk about the topic that I came here to talk about, because I want to talk about the problem of judicial review. But there are a couple of topics that I need to kind of inject into this conversation before getting to that, because I want to talk for a second at least about the since we're getting ready for memorializing the Pope that just recently died. That gives me a chance to talk about DeRosa's book, which I think people should read. It's called The Vicars of Christ. Vicars, spelled Vicar. The Vicars, there's an S on there, it's pluralized. The Vicars of Christ, that is to say, the papacy, the popes, and so on, the Vicars of Christ. And the subtitle of the book is the Dark Side of the Papacy. And I had read this book in the library some years ago, but I finally decided I need to have this book in my library for reference purposes, because there's some books that you read and you don't need them having digested information in the books, but your library should be books also that you have read, and now they are pieces on your shelf, on your library shelf, that help you to bring about a quantitative discussion when you're talking about certain things. You can document it based upon other person other than yourself that's saying it. Because if you're the total validation of any claims you're making, and you're that person, I don't know where that person was made, where they are the jack of all trades and the master of all of them. I don't know that person. And that book I read by DeRosa is a very, very important book. And I'll just say this on the QT and running. In that book by DeRosa called The Vicars, V-I-V at the end of the alphabet, Vicars, The Vicars of Christ, 2 dots there, The Dark Side of the Papacy. I went back to, I pulled that book off the shelf the other day just to go back through it. When something concretizing happens like that, and this is the Pope is a major figure in the world because the institution is worldwide. I pulled that shelf off. I pulled that book back off the shelf to go through it again. And one of the things that I remember from way back when, because I read this book some years and years ago, was how they choose the Pope. And one of the things you get from reading DeRosa's book is that I forget this Pope. I think was it Pius the ninth. One of those popes. I think it was one of the Pius. they had figured out before they were elected to the papacy. They had figured out the way they are electing these popes is that they wanted popes that were kind of like 1 foot in the grave, 1 foot out of the grave, because if they turn out to be a bad pope, they wouldn't be around long to do continued damage, and so they were not trying to get the fittest person to be the pope of the church. And so one of the priests who had goals to become pope understood the claim, understood how they make their selection. Now you can make the claim that it's somebody talking from the clouds and all that, but that's not how they're deciding. And they get behind those closed doors. They don't bother listening on the conversation. They don't want to hear people moving the furniture around. People that don't get any exercise sitting in a chair and their tummy sticking out and all that. And if they have a fight, they're gonna be, they're doing that bump you do when you score a touchdown, but they're not able to jump in the air and do the bump. They're just simply pushing around, one stomach pushing another stomach around. But they don't want to see the exclamation marks that are made, the comments that are made, and the arguments that are being made behind those closed doors, and some of it ending up into profane circles. And you let people in on that, then you're going to have a lot of the veils from people's eyes or fall away from people's eyes, and it will it will not be good. So this one person who wanted to become pope had figured out the way they're choosing the pope is not to choose the healthiest one that have longevity and would be around a long time. And if he's not a good pope, and they've had a lot of bad ones, then they would not have to worry about it, because this 1 foot out of the grave, 1 foot in the grave would rescind the verdict if the verdict turns out to be terrible. And so this person had figured out that they're choosing the pope that's kind of like not in his and not at the peak of his well-being. And so his strategy was to drag himself around as if he was half dead. And he would tell everybody, all the people in the Cardinal College, and that they didn't have long to live. And woe is me, my back is hurting, and this cane I'm walking around with shows my arthritis, and all kinds of different things he claimed was wrong with him. And people would tell him, "No, you're fit. You're not uh, that decrepit." He would assure them that no, that's not true. I'm feeling all these pains. I can tell you exactly all the symptoms. And he went on to describe how bad off he was, didn't have long to live, and so on and so forth, and had the crutches and all that. And they decided that maybe this guy, maybe he is bad off. maybe maybe we can't see all the debilitation. And they decided to make him pope. And when they made him pope, after that was done, he threw that cane, those crutches away, and declared, "I'm Caesar. I can do what I want to do." And then now deal with that. Because they made a decision based upon the fact this guy was debilitated, and he wasn't debilitated. All that was an act. And then once they declared that he was the one, he's got to be the one. He's a pope. And they declared him pope, according to DeRosa's book. That's a very good book to read. I don't expect you to be a believer in that which is in Rome and read the book, but those that that are not going to be affected by it in terms of their own faith, we're not all Catholics, and we're not all Protestants, we're not all Muslims, we're not all Buddhists, none of us are monks, and very few are nuns in terms of that. But you should read it because it gives you some historical understanding of that. And when this pope passed, I had to think about that and go back to that. It's a lot of things. Just a lot of things you can go and read. But that idea that they have that the pope is installed by some force other than people making political decisions, and it's a non-political position. We need to go back and see how that plays out from the very beginning up until the present time. So that I don't have anything against anybody, but you cannot contend a lot of things that are being contended here, and that's as true about that as it is about what I'm talking about in my main topic today, which is the this doctrine that wasn't born out of the framing of the Constitution of the United States, but was that was this is 1803, and the Constitution was ratified in 1788. So, how many years would it be between the time of the ratification of the document and then the creation of this fantasy of judicial review? And I want to bring to the conversation a book I've almost worn out here. It's well read. I mean, it's well written, and it's a very good read for what it does. But it comes out of the same misunderstanding of the Constitution that they all have. And you're not going to believe this because I'm not Harvard. I'm Wayne State, and I'm going to tell you this right now. The only reason it's not credited is because of the alliance between the government and these Ivy League schools, where they choose the members from those places and not these other places. I don't know if you ever had a person that headed the. In fact, I know they haven't had it. Never mentioned it. A person heading the Supreme Court and being the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court from Eastern. I don't think you're going to have that anytime soon. And so they choose these persons, and so they is one hand washing the other. And you might think because they have more of this college and university than they have at some others, and therefore these are the ones that have the scholars and things of that sort. And I'm not from those Ivy League universities, and I'll be the first one to tell you that I'm glad that is true, because with that, you see, it's like you run you Avis, and Avis, like in the car industry, Avis is number two, and they have to work a little harder and give a little bit more satisfaction of the customers to the customers, because they are running fast to first catch up and then hopefully at some point surpass. But they're not Hearst, and Hearst has a name out there, and Avis is number two, and a lot of others national. I use them when I travel. I try to get the cheapest one. They all got the cars from the same company. And I try to go down the line a little bit further down the line in order to get one that would be within my price range, and also according to the size of the car and things of that sort. But you have these little names out here, and some of it is names that have not been earned, but just by the positioning that has occurred over time, and then you begin to import certain things to it because of the fact that a reputation has been developed, and you have to think about what the reputation is based upon and how did it get created. But these persons that's on the court and so on and so forth, they're not better trained. None of them are better trained than I am, and none of them are in this. None of them are in this on this level. Now that I'm going to prove that hopefully today. I've been saying that, but I'm going to prove it because their claims out there on the table, and they out there on TV, and what and that's another way of validating them as constitutional scholars and things of that sort. But here's my problem with here's my issue with them. They write these books. This one is written by Mark Levine, and it's a very good read. Up to the point of where what it goes into is called. This one is called. I think out of all of Mark Levine's, I think he's written 5 books. I think it's 5 books he's written, all national bestsellers. This one is called "The Unfreedom of the Press," and he put another book out, "Liberty and Tyranny." Meritopia is one of his books. He's written quite extensively. Within a certain geography of his writing is within the geography of the claims have been made, and they write within that geographical setting. They don't go outside the orbit of it. They write within that which has been ingested and digested in these colleges. And I have been there, so I know how it works. I asked those professors at Eastern to show me some of the things that have been put to bed as claims that are being made by the Constitution. I asked them to tell me, for example, show me, since you told me, show me where it says that freedom of speech and freedom of press and freedom of religion and all the rest of are the bedrocks of freedom of this country. Where does it say that in the document? And show it to me in the book. Show that to me. The bedrock of the freedom in this country is not any of that. Let them say what they say. They better start listening to what I'm saying. Because the bedrock of freedom in this country is not freedom of press, freedom of speech, right to assemble, and so on and so forth. The bedrock of freedom in this country is the separation of powers. And if they understood that is a bedrock, then they understand why it is that the prohibition is against any claims coming against it by the Congress. If they understood, first of all, the separation of powers and the importance of that to have the power separated as the custodian of freedom, because in the competition of each of them having equal sovereignty, equal balancing of the other branches of government, the power to balance it in this branch, in that branch, and the other branch, and each one of them can balance the power. It keeps then by them being in their own lane, each one keeping the others from going out of control. But if you notice in the reading of the document, you scholars, I'm challenging all of you. If you put the prohibition against the Congress, which they do it in the First Amendment to the Constitution, that comes out of George Mason and others. George Mason was leading a group there that were not satisfied that they have significantly enough. They had done some great things in the separation of powers, but even therein, because of the repeatedness, the repetitiveness of human nature, is not history repeating itself. Human nature is repetitive. Until you alter it biologically and make it into something that has never been before, you can't alter it certainly by talking about men men being women, unless you can change the dichotomy of male and female and how that creates others of themselves in the future, and it's a replication of that. Unless you can stop repeating human nature, then there are certain things that you're going to have repeated because the design is the same. You can't change the design, then forget it. That's going to happen again. And that's what's repetitive. History does not repeat itself. History does not go around in circles. It goes around in a spiral. It goes on, it's this and it spirals up to another level and so on and so forth. You ought to read some of these videos coming out and you'll see what I'm talking about, because there are people raising questions right now of things I put to bed back in the 70s, because I knew they're not going anywhere off the earth. They're now you'd be surprised, man, the videos coming out now, and they're now showing you that didn't happen. But you can kind of throw something out there, and then people think because it's now been repetitively mentioned over and over and over and over again down time through time, and then you get here, and then it must be true because look at the validation of all the person put their hands on it and did not disavow it. It's being real, and that's what happened in the Constitution. Everybody has said that in the Constitution there is the um, guarantee of the freedom of speech. That's what the framers were in fact doing in the First Amendment, where they have the freedom of speech, the freedom of press, and it prohibits the Congress from, in fact, going into that domain and passing laws in order to restrict that. And they did that. But why did they do it? They did it because if you, in fact, keep Congress from invading in that space there, then if there is no law that does it, then no other institution can come in and do anything with it because of the lane that they're in. If you don't have a law, you listen carefully. If you don't have a law that, in fact, restricts speech, there's nothing for the President of the United States to do because there's no law, and his job is to enforce the law, and there is no law. The separation of power is being validated by that. By assigning it to the Congress, you've also restrained the President of the United States and the court at the same time. If you don't pass a law against, if you don't pass a law, because the Congress would want to stop the press. Obviously, want to stop the press. Why? Because the press job, if it was doing its job, it would be the overseer of the things that the government is in fact doing. The legislative branch of being the lawmaking part of the government, and you don't want to have that oversight. You want to restrain the press from doing its job because it's going to inform the people and so on and so forth. People do not understand how important it is that when people get, why it is that when people get in power, the first thing they want to do is control the information. Because through the information, control the people. The people could not, if you cannot, if you ever create a revolutionary sentiment in a country, the first thing you want to do is suborn the information. You want to, in fact, control that. Because otherwise, you got somebody informing the people about what's going on, and then the control is being lost because the information is where the power is. And people say, well, information is power. That's true to an extent. Information is consciousness, and consciousness is power. You create a consciousness about. I mean, the reason why the reason why they. Do I want to say this or not? Would I get in trouble? I'm in enough trouble as it is. I run into trouble all the time. They got me blocked. I try to send some money, help somebody out in Colorado. I don't even know the person, but they found out about me. If you tell me a sob story, your dog was hungry, you're hungry, I'm pretty much going to hear that. Somebody been spreading my name around. And so I ask people, how did you find out about me? Some people write me, I need this, I need that. They tell me you will help me. I have limited means, but I'm a sucker for a sob story because I came out of poverty. I understand how it feels. So I'm a sucker for a good sob story. A lot of them write me, my dog is hungry. I haven't eaten and so on. I was having a person out in Colorado. I don't even know the person, and I was trying to send some money there, and I found out that Western Union has found me out again. I hadn't been using it for a long time, and they found me out and they canceled they canceled the transaction. I found a way to get the money to them anyway, but they wanted to ask this person I sent it to and ask get what's the address, and they got the address and it was my address, and then they sent they refunded my money. And that's okay because what I did I sent an overnight mailing and I gave them extra $100 and I was sending $200. Nothing that's going to break the bank, but I helped somebody. But I sent extra $100, and the idea was that I'm not going to let anybody stop me. And so I was going to give the person $200, gave him $300 to help him out because I knew that I was convinced I didn't know. I was convinced that was a hardship and so on. But you have things like that happen. That just shows me that they know I'm out here, and they know that they can't touch this. That's what they know, and they know if I know it, I'm going to say it. And I'm not. I'm one of those. I'm just not. I'm unintimidatable. And that's been my history, and that's been a bugaboo of some of the things that stopped me in going as far as I could have gone if I had just learned to keep my mouth closed. But God, see, I'm a preacher's kid, but God gave me, when they go into church and say that, um, take your burdens to the Lord and leave them there. If that's what God want me to do, then what God give me hands for? If all I'm going to do is use my hand and hand the problem back to Him. So I'm not in. I'm not. I know what they say. I'm not in that school. There's some things that I'm supposed and we're supposed to be doing, and you just can't keep handing stuff down and handing it down, and kicking the can down the road. They love to do that because they don't want to be held accountable. I'm not into that. I'm into let's deal with the problems let's deal with it right now, and then pass down something better because we rectified some of the problems during our time, and then we're passing down a better situation to those that come after us. And then they keep doing. Then we have actually perfected the habitat. We've actually we've actually done what the framers had intended. They didn't intend to solve all the problems, but they certainly put things in motion so that if you just continue to tumble solutions over the other solutions, you'll finally get to where they were talking about, a more perfect union. But you're not going to do it the way you're doing it right now. And people talk about what you advocating. I heard this the other day. Uh, these sidebar conversations. You're advocating chaos. You don't think you're living in chaos right now. You're not. You have your eyes wide closed because this is chaos. This is what they're doing in Washington right now. This is chaos. And I don't know of a person in Washington right now, quite frankly, not any of them. Certainly not. They think Ted Cruz is the one, or some of the others. They say, well, which one, which party? Neither party excites me. I don't think any of them are doing anything, and none of them understand the Constitution, and they're not, and none of, and no one in the country is following it. Nobody. This idea that you have up for 222 years. I was doing the math the other night. Ever since Marbury versus Madison, to some extent before the Marbury versus Madison case, to some extent, we were following the Constitution of the United States. But you know what happened after 1803, and for the last 222 years, since that time to the present time, we've not been following the Constitution of the United States. We've been following the Supreme Court because we bought into this idea that the court has the power of judicial review. The court singularly has the right of judicial review. Singularly has the right to interpret the Constitution of the United States. Well, if you have, listen carefully here, if you have a separation of power in all three branches of government, which is set up in the Articles 1, 2, and 3, they did that at the very outset of forming a perfect union, not a perfect union, a more perfect union. You're never going to have a perfect union because you have human beings in it and you're going to have flaws because of that. We don't have angels running the government. Never going to have that. But you have in the Articles 1, 2, and 3, the first thing they did, this is the very first thing they did. People need to think about why that, and why was the freedom of speech, press, and all the rest of it, why is that an afterthought? Because that's an addendum to the Constitution, isn't it? See, everybody says that the amendments are the Constitution. They are the Constitution. They're not the Constitution. They're addendums to it. They are additions to it. That's why you cannot contravene the Constitution in the amendment process. I'm saying that to you, and they're not going to say anything about it. They're going to get quiet here because they're not in this wheelhouse. They're not in this wheelhouse, and they know they're not in this wheelhouse. I'm watched by the government, and that doesn't bother me because I'm going to speak the truth to the extent that I know it, and I know it to a better extent than they know it because I listen to them, and I have to tell you that this is not it. This idea, this is a very. I won this book out reading it, trying to digest more and more. So I read it more than one time. The Unfreedom of the Press, and the idea that this book has is that the idea of the First Amendment is freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and that's the bedrock and the rounding point of the freedoms of the country. Well, if that is really the intention of the framers, can I ask you this question here? Then why is that then an addendum, or let's say this, an afterthought in the document? Why isn't that Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, and just itemize that which is the Bill of Rights? Why is that? And why is the Bill of Rights in addition to the Constitution? Article 1, 2, and 3 are the very beginning of the Constitution. And if you go back and look at prior to that, you really see the intent. Because in the previous document that governed the country, the Articles of Confederation, they didn't let the federal government do anything. Isn't that true? They didn't let them do anything. The federal government was nailed down absolutely 100%. Gave it no power to do anything because they knew if it was allowed to do anything, the potential under the circumstances in which it was in fact drawn up at the beginning of point of the country declaring its independence. You have to keep in mind when you're fighting a war now. When you're fighting a war, look at the Greek as the example of that. When you're fighting a war, your best and brightest thinkers are galvanized around that warfare. But in peacetime, better mind, those great minds, because you got to first of all get this satisfied, and then those great minds can then be put attentively on something else that the country needs to have. And that's why you see this development going on, because those minds that were in fact creating the revolution toppled into other minds actually doing some work in addition to that, because that work had been done, and then these other great minds could come forward and do other things. Thomas Paine didn't write anything in the Constitution. What he did in 1776 is major. I don't think what he wrote was read out there to those troops, as they say in these books. They're going they're going to say the great George Washington, the greatest president we've had, read Paine's work to his military to fire them up and get them to fight stronger and things of that sort. The reason why they were showing up to fight stronger was because the person that was leading them showed he's willing to suffer the things that they suffered. He slept in the same tents they slept in, the same hardships. When he's sleeping on the ground, he slept on the ground also. This is the greatest man this country has seen in leadership. And they he didn't have to go and read what Paine said. They saw the practice. Washington was preaching and practicing what he was preaching, and he was also practicing it. And they saw the example, and they were willing to suffer the consequences that they had in fact pledged themselves to, because Washington was in fact doing it, and he had the right to lead because he was in fact willing to submit himself to what he was asking other people to do. That's impressive when you can do that, and not too many persons have succeeded in doing that. I have to say this. I'm not trying to knock anybody, but I have to say this. I've not found anybody that was willing to walk it and talk at the same time, walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. I don't know anyone like that. My students sometimes will jump on me, former students I had, and they say, "Mr. Moss, you said this about," and it'd be like Malcolm X, for example. And they'll say, "You said this and you said that and blah blah blah," and yeah, I did. And I said that because I was talking about a very different conversation about Malcolm X. I thought he was right, in terms of standing up against his mentor, Elijah Muhammad. The children and that kind of thing bothered him and all that. And I did that because I took his side in that argument. But in terms of some other things that were not part of that conversation, I did not side with him. I thought that, if you're a leader and you're a moral leader of a group, not a cult. There's no such thing as a cult. Everybody is all. You can say all of them are in a cult, but if you're claiming to be a moral leader, then you have to then understand your level must be above the level of those you're trying to lead, because you're the example, and you have to get them to imitate that. Parents got that responsibility to the children, by the way. You have to duplicate yourself and your children. And if you cannot, if there's nothing for you to duplicate, that's why you're raising these crazy kids, because they're duplicating craziness, and that's what you see out there on steroids. You see crazy children. They got crazy parents. In my neighborhood, that's the first thing I want to know. Whose boy are you? And so you're out there being wild. You're out there wild, and they wonder, whose boy are you? Well, and then they say things like the fruit doesn't fall very far from the tree, and they make a point about that, and so they look at who produced this. Well, let me see, you already seen the parents. Look at the children. That's the parents, and the children are playing out the ignorance that they have been left in because the parents have not brought them out of it. All of us are born into ignorance, and we have to be taught out of it. We don't know we're disturbing the world by crying and disturbing the whole church. They got to carry you out the door and got the blanket over your head, and maybe they don't do it anymore in the church. You see what nurses in the church put the blanket over the child, nurse, but carry the child. When the child stops feeding, he starts crying because now he's wet, and then they have to take him out of the church because he's crying. Because children, when they're wailing like that, they're wailing for attention, and if they're not at peace with the conditions, which their environment, they want the whole world to know about it, and they don't know they're disturbing. They don't care about disturbing. They're gonna cry out and let the world be attentive to the fact they're in pain. I have to tell you this too, a little side point. The side point, like these side points. If the child is in fact in that diaper, and that diaper is wet and he's crying out, and the world does not attend itself to it, the child realizes that no one cares, and that child becomes psychotic just by having a wet diaper and nobody comes to attend to it, because the child is learning nobody cares. And I can tell a lot about these children by looking. I can tell a lot about these parents, about these children that's running around here, because that's how that's produced. But if you're the example of that, what you teach, that's impressive and also very unusual. And Washington did that. I have to give him. You have to read these books about Washington, and you have to understand the greatness of a person who they're pulling at the man's mantle, at his coattails, and trying him to go into an area of control and power, and he resists that. All of them throwing flowers at the man's feet and trying to get him to go into an area that the world had always seen, because the world has always obeyed kings and had never obeyed a president before George Washington. Show me one example of it. Show me one example anywhere in the world. George Washington, they say in this classroom, he was the first president in the history of the United States. That's true, but he's also the first president in the history of the world. Show me a president before that. And then show me one where they're throwing flowers at him and throwing kingship on him, and each time it fell off his mantle. And then the man walked away from power twice in a row. Do not tell me these things you tell everybody else. Do not put Lincoln up there as the greatest president this country's had, because this man is walking into a mold that's already been set. And the mold he walked into was imperfectly walked into based upon the standard, because that's a standard right there. And if we could understand the standard that was set by the framers and respect that, we would not be squabbling like we're doing right now, and we would not be in the danger that we're in right now. We're in danger right now in this country because we're not the thinkers that they were, and we've torn up what they did by our craziness in this country today. They separated these powers, and for them to have rescinded that in 1803, as they did on the Brown versus Board of it, Brown versus Marbury versus Madison. The Brown case is also another time we got off, and people have to read this book called what's that book? Uh, um, it's a very good book. I'm trying to think of the name of it, but it talks about it. The grounding point of it. It talks about the Brown ruling in some depth. It's one of the best books. I got to think of the name of it. These books used to roll off my tongue, but not as much today as it was then. But anyway, they agreed upon. See, they get together and make these political decisions, and you think they are doing constitutional bidding because they are all in agreement on it. They had made the decision about Brown probably on the golf course somewhere. They'd been out there golfing. You know, it was all men at that time. There were no women on the court. Senator O'Connor had not yet come, and these are all men out there. They go out, play golf together and things like that. And out there deciding, and then they have little meetings where they understand that they're going to rule and have any power in making a ruling this far away from what they've had over the last 58 years from Plessy versus Ferguson from 1896 to 1954. During that 58-year period of time, for them to have been so drastically jumping away from what they had claimed earlier and then claiming something else today, they have to explain if you have a 5-4 verdict, who's going to follow that? You still split. You got a verdict and you're changing the verdict, but only 5 of you agreed to change it. They got a problem, and they knew they had a problem, so they all had to come out unanimously to do it. And they had made that decision before Thurgood Marshall. They're gonna act like Thurgood Marshall bowled the court over and things like that. That didn't happen. We have to get the history straight, and we don't have it straight. We don't have anything straight in this country about the past. They have skirted the past is always veiled as an enigma wrapped around a mystery wrapped around an enigma. That's how they do the past, because in order to control those who control the present controls the past. And what's that thing about in the control the present is to control the future, something like that. You know, where you have to have control over the consciousness is what they're saying. Because once people become conscious now, they're going to be a little bit more obtuse. They're not going to be following you quite like sheep. And that's what we have right now, because they think that this is the way it always has been. They won't have an idea of how it was prior to all this craziness they got born into space. They think, for example, the court. Here are these judges. To me, it's absolutely insane to me. These judges like Bozeman down here on the Superior Circuit Court, and this judge is telling the president, I want to slap this guy. And I'm not going to slap anybody, but you know what? If I ever want to haul off and smack somebody, that'd be one person that would get it. That guy wanted them to get on that to tell the president of the United States. He's a judge, a Superior Court judge, a guy down here that was not even created by the framers. That court is not set up by the framers. That court is set by one of the co-equal branches of government. That's so. The framers set up 3 co-equal, co-sovereign branches of government, but they put in the infinite wisdom, and I'm saying infinite here as if wisdom is ever infinite. I know too much about the history of the past to be saying there is anything that is infinite, because the idea of the one is that there's only one one. And if you notice the numbers of that is 0 and 1 in terms of like in the code, the application of the code universally, the universe recognizes 0 and 1 because it recognizes uh, 0, which is nothingness, and then 1, which is infinity. So that 0 and 1 is like, you have in 0 and 1, you have an infinite possibility. You see, it's only out of nothing that everything is possible. If you have something that's already happened, then it's only able to do something else. But if you have nothing that's possible, then out of nothingness comes the possibility of everything happening, because nothing is the beginning point. That's what that 0 and 1 is about. But when you have that, therefore, my claim is very simple. Go back to the source, and then go to the point where this was instituted by the framers of the country, and let's follow the preposition because they are the authors of it. And just like that song says, don't go changing. That's the song. But it has a lot of reference in terms of how it plays out in real life, because you can't go and start altering people who are your betters and then try to alter what they did and turn you're going to make it better without having the prowess that they had in creating it in the first place, because they're the authors of it. And there are certain things in mind that they studied. They were just not in that room, just emoting and making noise and things of that sort. There was not even one reference that I read. You can help me on this. This is not. I've not done all the study on this particular regard of it. I don't think there's one fight in that place. Go and try to find where people who are equally endowed, but you know, con- consummately endowed. Everyone having some knowledge in their egos are in that room. They didn't do what President Brooks did to Charles Sumner, where he beat him with that cane in the Congress and beat him down because of the dispute they'd had, because Sumner made some comments. And he took some exception to it. That person was related to him and then beat him down with that cane, just went to his desk and started beating on him. There's no record of any of that happening. I've not read one book where they claim that somebody went some upside somebody's head. They had respect that they had members in there that were co-equal intellects, not co-equal. I'm not saying he knew what that person knew. I'm saying that they had respect, that they were in there with others of like mind who had wanted to do create the same thing, a good governance body, and they were all committed to that and willing to argue and disagree and fight over. I'm saying, fighting trying to get the wording right to do what they had in mind to do, and that was first and foremost. We got the restraining power. We inherited that from the articles, and we have to now continue to do that. But we didn't do it the right way. We have to now figure out how to accomplish that, and they did. And I'm saying that Articles 1, 2, and 3, you scholars, you can't argue this point. You don't recognize this point, first of all. But the Articles 1, 2, and 3 are the foundation of that's the foundation for the freedom of the country. The rest of that is an afterthought. Otherwise, why is freedom of press and speech and the rest of it, why is that an addendum to the document and that's primary? Explain that to me. You haven't even thought about that. In this book on freedom of the press, I understand what he's saying. He's saying in the context of the confusion. They don't. When everybody's saying something, you can't recognize it as being off because of the validation of it. And we've been taught that the validation is in numbers. And by it being repetitively tumbling down to us, we learn not to, in fact, challenge it because it has a certain amount of validation based upon the longevity of the claims that have been made. My thing to you is this: to challenge everything. And I'm going to tell you this, and they're not going to like this. The freedom of speech and press and all the rest of it can get you in more trouble by letting that run awry, uncontrolled. That's not the intent of what they did in the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, press, and so on and so forth. If the press was doing its job, what you need to do is make sure that the government cannot, in fact, do things that restrict the press from being the overseer of what they're doing, because the press should be doing its job, which is inform the people of what their government is in fact doing it, so you can have an enlightened public that can hold the elected leaders accountable for what they're doing, but more likely than not, what they're not doing in the halls of power of this country, because you don't want them running amok. You don't want them making one pledge and then doing something different when they get in power. You know, there's a there's a thing that they had. You probably have seen this one thing where they have a guy having to decide, does he want to go to heaven or does he want to go to hell? And he cannot make up his mind. And it tells God and the devil he's not yet made up his mind which one he wants to go to. So they decided to this is a politician now. They decided to put the politician in hell one day and in heaven one day. So the politician goes to heaven, and it's people walking around and milk and honey, the whole nine, and serene, quiet. Everybody's laid back, docile, and so on. So he spends a day a quiet day in heaven. The next day, he gets on the elevator and goes down and arrives in hell. And down there, they're boogieing and doing the Liddy hop and all the rest of it. And there's all kinds of grapes and just all kinds of wonderful things, dishes and so on, very exciting, music blaring. And so he decides, wow, this is great. I never had so much fun. And so he says the next day, he said, I made up my mind now. I choose hell over heaven. And so he's back on the middle floor and gets on the elevator and goes down into hell. And he gets down there and he sees torment. He sees people screaming and hollering and in pain and so on. And he asks the devil, what happened? And the devil says, yesterday I was campaigning. Today is the result of it. Saying that to a politician now. And just to make the point that that's what they do. They're campaigning and they promise you euphoria. Everything is great. You're not going to have it any better than if you that song by the Temptation. Vote for me and I set you free. I'll set you free. And people believe that. And that's a time they do it every 4 years. And every 4 years, people continue to fall for it. And don't recognize that behind that all that's masking, and behind that mask are some very vicious people. And then do I know that they're vicious people behind that mask. And that's why a lot of times they try these little things they do. I've been called 4 times by them and things like that. That doesn't bother me. I expect that. And they want to give me that official voice and blah blah blah, and I'm so and so, and you did this and you wrote this and you sent this over and blah blah blah, and this person that you sent it to, no one know they've got their eye on. I didn't even have the name, give you the name. And you'd be surprised of how they try to they don't come out and say you they don't come out and tell you they're trying to smash you. And they'd give me the name of a person I've sent money to and want to know blah blah. I'm telling myself, I'm being fraternal in my conversation, but I'm saying to myself, here you are. I want to say some words here, but here you are berating me for sending my money to who I want to have my money, and there you are sending my money to people I don't want to have my money, like Zelensky, for example, and you sending it over there anywhere against my will, and that's my money that I have sweat equity into, and you didn't ask me one thing about whether I want that money spent that way, and I didn't have one thing to say about it, and you did it, and I can't question you. And when I question them, by the way, they get angry. That's one other thing I've noticed when they, I asked this one guy. One day I had his number on my call service, so I called him back, and they don't like you calling back and then questioning them. They want to be the ones that initiate conversation, and they want to ask you. When I call them back and ask them some things, they don't like that. And so my proposition is very clear. The framers, and that's it. The rest of it, you can get out of here. If you're being battered up against the claims made in the document, I can't use you because that's it. Until you can show me, and you can't do it, they haven't done it so far. Something better. They tried to do something away from it. They all came back to it. That's why when I travel, I try to make sure I look at the documents of the governing class. What are they using to govern the country? And every one of them just reading the same thing over and over again that was done here in the 18th century, the latter part of the 18th century. The last 2 decades of the 18th century, we were on it. And that's why this idea that we produced at that point in time, the first intellectuals in this country, and so far the last, that's the claim made by Ayn Rand, and she's right about that even today. If she were still alive, she died in '82, but if she was still alive today, that's the claim that she made, and she's right about that then. And she'd be more right about it if he said it now. They're not anybody up there. They're worse now up there than they were during her time period. But she's right in what she said during her time period as well. There are no intellectuals in our Congress. None. And they're talking about running AOC for president in 2028. You can't be serious in this country and be saying things like that. You can't be a serious country and have this guy named Tim Walz, who you just threw him out as vice president, along with Kamala Harris. You threw Harris out. He was on the ticket, so he got thrown out too. But if he had been at the top of the ticket, he fools himself believing that he's thrown out because they threw her out. No, they were throwing you out too because they already picked up how crazy you are. He saw you coming out there waving your hand and all that. This man is a madman. But most of it is covered up. But this man was coming out there and doing all. Trump even picked it up and said something's wrong with this man. Yeah, something was wrong. Is wrong with all of them. And what's wrong with them? What's wrong with them is that they think that they represent this right here. They think they represent this. This is the Constitution of the United States. They actually believe that they represent what is intended in this document right here, and only they can do it. That's why they don't want to leave. They think they're fulfilling a mission. They are that body that's born and can't get born because the body has a foot in the way of the birth canal. And then as the time for the birthing occurs and gets closer to it, then nature turns that body around. Because if you're in there 9 months in that condition there, you're going to have brain bleed. So then at the point of the body now being ready to be birthed, being incubated for 9 months, 9.5 months, the clock then, just like the grass is now coming, I got to cut the grass today, and reason that is because the clock is now bringing another development into existence against Al Gore's wishes, whether he likes it or not. Didn't ask Al Gore if they could do it or not. But the body turned, and now the head is where the feet were, and now that incubation period is over, and the birthing takes place, and it's already determined whether it's going to birth into existence, the male or the female. Nothing that you can do to change that, whether you like it or not. Doesn't ask your permission for it. That's already been determined because the child is a product of both parents, and it has in there the possibility of either one, and it depends upon which one of the um, uh, eggs that's of these spermatozoa, which part of the spermatozoa hits that egg, and the 1 to 1 billion possibilities that were possible, then out of that comes the miracle that each of us is, because each of us is a miracle if we can understand that, and we need to embrace that. But the fact is that there are 3 different tests you have to pass before you even get here. And George Washington passed some tests on the other side before he got here. There were 3 tests he had to pass even before he was even conscious of having passed it, because the spermatozoa had passed 3 tests: hostile environment, because the environment that the spermatozoa is shot into is acidic. It has to go upstream and defy gravity, and it has a cosmic understanding that it has to hit that egg in order to bring about the impregnation. 3 tests it did when it was not even conscious that it had the conscience to do that. And that's why they can't stop me, and why I know I cannot be stopped. They can call, they're not going to stop anything, and they're going to have to, and they may have to learn that the hard way. One was going to, but both of it's going to be taught. Whether they learn it or not, that's the teaching. James Brown had a song I used to like called "Money Won't Change Me, but Time Will Take Me On." I'm talking about that time. Yep, see that every day. But money won't change me, and they won't change me by these little things that they do. All that stuff is inconsequential. It's the framers, folks, and they set in motion a governance here in terms of the powers being separated so that each one would make a claim in their own lane. And this idea of judicial review doesn't make any sense. Only in the sense that each part of the government must be a review, have a review of the Constitution, because if you don't have, if you're not able to make a construal of the Constitution, you cannot do the other things that you cannot do the main thing in which your branch is delegated to do by the Constitution. For example, here's the problem that they have with the idea of judicial review. The idea that only the courts should review what the Constitution says. Every branch has the construal of the Constitution, because if you don't have the construal of the Constitution, you cannot enforce the Constitution unless you have some construal of what the Constitution says. So the review of the document is not germane just to the judicial branch of government. It's germane to every branch of the government. Because without such a construal, how do you execute the law if you don't understand the law, have some control of what the law is? How do you enforce it? And this idea that only the Supreme Court can interpret the law, this is madness. This is madness. The Marbury versus Madison case is a good example of the court doing tremendous misdirection to bring that result about, because Marshall had a real task on his hand. He had a real task on his hand. This man, Marshall, was a master politician, because the intent of the framers was to have, you can read 78 and some of the other higher level parts of the Federalist Papers, up there 75, somewhere around there, all the way up to the end of it, 85 Federalist Papers altogether. I think it's 78. I have to go back and review it again. But the court, the Supreme Court, which was the third branch, it wasn't even the first branch of government. They created the legislative branch first. You had to have some law, and then you have to have the enforcement of it, and then you have to have something that will interpret, that really would not so much to interpret the law, but because all of them have that responsibility, but somebody that would in fact be the arbiter of disputes, because we get into conflicts in terms of this one don't like that one, this one's bigger than the other one, and the bully will impose, and you have to have somebody that would be an arbiter of different dispute that may come up between members, and also between the states and things like that. And you have to have an arbiter, but not always will that be. That's another problem that we have too. That we think that every time there's a dispute, that the dispute is to be handled by the court. You can say that happens a number of times, but that's not always true. The court is not intended to be the gospel. And really, what they need to do with the court, quite frankly, if you take my word for it, it certainly was intended by the framers. I can tell you that was their intent. Is that any construal of the law can in fact be you can in fact go up against a claim that's being made. It just takes a little bit more of the substance of the framing of the document, and also the framing of the government to bring the result about. This idea that you simply sight unseen will accept anything the court says, if you think that's what the framers intended. The framers intended that if the court goes out of his mind, which it does that with regularity, then it just takes 2/3 of the states to get together and say, we're not doing that. It just takes the states to stand up and say that that's not what the and that's what the South was doing. The South was simply saying, as a consortium, we're not going to accept that. But that is true. And Marbury versus Madison changed that, and now we're not listening to the Constitution anymore. If you notice it, they always talk about what the court has said, because in 1803, and for the last 222 years, it's not the Constitution that really rules the roost. It is the Supreme Court. And that is not intended. The weakest part of the government that was intended by the framers now have the hegemony to tell the President of the United States what to do. And that goes back to 1803 in Marbury versus Madison. And next week, as we close out this part of the series we're talking about, I want to go into how the court did it, because that's where we got off in 1803 with Marbury versus Madison. Okay, I got to get out of here, as always, running over time. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.